Hi everyone, welcome to another session. Today we spoke to Shereen Daniels, who's the Managing Director of HR Rewired. Shereen is an absolute lightning bolt of energy, and we really enjoyed talking to her about some quite serious and potentially still taboo topics in the workplace. And that's being open about racism, how potentially it's generational and the trauma is passed down, how sometimes in different work environments people still can't say black or black people, and we also went into details how sometimes with the different groups people are setting up, there seems to be two different types of groups. It's white people and everybody else. So there's some really good insight from this, and it was fantastic to talk to Shereen.
Yeah, Shereen's really been spearheading the conversations around racial and ethnic minority representation within organizations. She, as Jack said, is a real lightning bolt of energy, really good fun to speak to. And I think even though we recorded this back in 2020, I think now, shortly after the events with George Floyd, all the content is still so relevant and we've still got a long way to go. So really hope you enjoy the episode.
Yeah, please like and subscribe and catch us on all the socials.
Look, Shereen, we are genuinely delighted to kind of have you on this show. I love your energy. I love your mission and your purpose and everything that you're doing at the moment. So for those that kind of haven't come across you on kind of social media, you've obviously been in Forbes and you've got quite a strong presence now in the HR community. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about who you are, where you've come from, and your kind of journey to date?
Yeah, of course. Well, firstly, thank you, Matthew and Jack, for having me. I affectionately always say I'm like the noisy one on social media, because I'm like every single day I've come in with something to do with like racial injustice, something to do with anti-racism, something to do with change and just being better, And my story started, well, I've been in HR for a long time. So, I did when did I do my degree? Right, I graduated in 2003, so this tells you like a little bit how old I am. So graduated in 2003 with my first degree in business and psychology. Then I've got a second degree in international HR. So I have been the textbook CIPD HR person that's kind of trundled along. Worked for some really well-known brands before some of them closed, like Carphone Warehouse, Gala Coral, Green King, Cafe Nero, Orion Publishing Group. My first job randomly was looking after the Middle East for a risk management company that then got bought by G4S, which tells you everything you need to know. I don't even need to say any more about what my job was doing. So yeah, very eclectic experience in HR. And I had my second child in 2018. She was a bit of a surprise baby. I'd had cancer a few years ago, very serious, lots of chemotherapy, and you get told no more children. And I was like, oh, I've got one, I'll be grateful. And lo and behold, I have a second one. And everyone went, how did that happen? I was like, I don't know. Here we go.
Amazing.
I know. So I jacked in my job, so to speak, at Cafe Nero, not with any game plan, and as you do, thought, oh, let me dip my toe in politics, because that's what you do, don't you, when you have a second baby, and then you think you're going to jack in a proper job. And so I did a little dip my toe in the water of politics, as I like to say, with an MP leadership scheme with Operation Black Vote, which is all about getting representation in the political corridors of power. And that was last year, so 2019. And I remember sitting there with all these people, right? And everyone's talking about, this is the change that they're trying to do in their community. And, they care about this. And I remember sat there thinking, I'm representing the business world. And I'm just thinking, gosh, I wonder when I'm going to find like my mission and purpose, in life. Because I'm listening to everybody else say all this stuff. And then you fast forward to May of this year, 2020. And when the death of George Floyd happened, and we saw it all play out on our TV screens, on our phones, and then we saw the video of Amy Cooper. And for anyone who doesn't remember, she was the woman who was walking her dog. So she's a white woman. A black guy said to her, your dog is not meant to be there. She threatened to call the police. And basically, she's like a textbook example of weaponizing the color of your skin, right? And I was in this space of seeing all of that play out. but also hearing within the UK that we were going, oh God, it's so terrible what's happening in the US. Thank God we're not a racist country. Oh, Shereen, can you imagine? Like, you've never experienced racism. Of course you haven't, you know, so there was all of that going on, right? And I just got more and more chippy on LinkedIn. So I'm like the miscongeniality on social media up until this point. So I'm the one that goes, oh yeah, that's so great. You know, I'm super pleased to be doing, yeah, I'm that one, right? And then as this was playing out, I was like, you know, racism is a thing, full stop. And then my sentences started getting shorter and shorter. And then I recorded a first video on the 31st of May. Then I recorded a video every single day for 100 days, bar a 2-week holiday, basically talking about my experience of being a Black woman, a mum of 2 children, my views of the world. And I just had people pay attention. Firstly, not a lot of people paid attention, then thousands of people paid attention all over the shop. And so that's what brings me here today. That's like a very long history, isn't it? Lord have mercy, it's very long, sorry.
It's perfect.
It's fascinating though. It's fascinating.
Because it's all relevant. That's why I say, because you know,
Yeah.
you know when you see some people and you think, God, they just popped out of nowhere. Like, what have they got? And I tell people the context of the story to say, I am just a mum of 2 kids living in Gravesend, Kent. You know, there is nothing super special about my life. There's nothing super special about me. I'm an average little person. Do you know what I mean? I didn't have a brand. I didn't have the great big job title. I was just really annoyed, you know?
And authentic, right? In your conversation, you know, and I think that's what people want to hear right now. You know, it's less of the kind of corporate line. It's more of the true story, the authenticity, and therefore, you know, the emotion and the relevancy, you know, behind what you're saying, right? And so what, like, why do you think, you know, no one was really listening before, and then, you know, all of a sudden thousands of people, you know, suddenly started to pay attention. Like what is it that changed that suddenly, you know, everyone's kind of interested in kind of hearing about it?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one, we cannot ignore the headspace we were all in, because we were slap bang in the middle of coronavirus. So it was like, well, where were we, May? Like the first lockdown, do you know what I mean? So we've been home, you know, you've had time to kind of slow down. You pay more attention to things that are going on in the digisphere, as I like to say. You know, we're reading more, we're watching more documentaries. We've got more time because we don't have the commute anymore. We're off the treadmill from that point of view. Well, some of us, we're off the treadmill. So I think people were just still enough, you know, to clock what was going on. And that's why I think the ripples and then the waves that came off the George Floyd thing was because globally, there's a lot of people in the business world, you know, white collar workers, as we like to call ourselves, who were home to see this. Whereas before, we would have been at work and, you know, we had all these other things going on. So I think that's a thing. I also think the Black community, and I say that from a global perspective, started speaking out more. You know, it's not that we hadn't done before, but if I think about the Shereen pre-May 2020 and the Shereen now, I would definitely say that I was very conscious of the fact that I was living in a minority society, and therefore I felt like my voice didn't matter. Do you know what I mean? So I felt like every time there was an issue, and as Black people, we can sense when there's a racial motivation to somebody's behavior. It's not all, I always say to people, it's not always about the M word. You know what I mean? It's not the overtness of racism that we kind of see play out in the States is not the same as in the UK. Ours is more insidious. It's like more covert. And when you know that the second you bring up anything that you feel like is to do with race, the color of your skin, your treatment, you know, anything, you're ignored or you're dismissed or you're told you're playing the race card, or somebody says, you know, but my best mate's best mate is Black and, you know, we go barbecue twice, you know, or you know,
I know a Black person.
Right.
Yeah.
Can't be racist.
Right. And then they go, and oh my God, I took all my family to see Black Panther, you know, so you're kind of getting into it, you know. I kid you not. Listen, you think I'm joking, I'm deadly serious. You know, so you kind of get into all of this, and so as a Black person, you just think to yourself, it's not worth it, you know? So, but equally what happened is our silence, we were almost complicit in the fact that nothing fundamentally changed, because it's a bit like, when something happens, right, and then like 2 years later somebody says, oh my god, this happened to me, and everyone goes, why the bloody hell did you say nothing for like 2 years, like as if I don't know. It's a little bit like that. So we kidded ourselves that this silence, universally meant that we were living in a post-racial society, which basically means race wasn't an issue anymore, because we'd fixed all the things that had come on the back of slavery. We'd fixed all of these stuff. And actually what you saw that George Floyd and his unfortunate murder, because there's been lots of those examples before, but that particular moment, and you've got coronavirus, and you've got the fact we're all at home, I think it created a chasm almost within our day-to-day normality that made us step back and go, maybe the world isn't as I saw it, because you can have two people occupying the same space who have a very different experience of the world just because of who they are and the color of their skin. It's literally that simple,
Yeah, totally. You mentioned obviously that you were worried about your voice not necessarily being heard. You've not spoken up in the same way before. Was there anything else you were worried about? Like, were you worried about sort of, not being taken seriously, or raising big issues in corporate environments and, people hiding away from that? Or
yeah, so listen, the extent of and I always talk about like the social conditioning that we all have been victims of, but particularly Black people, because it's a very specific type. So I think the first thing to say is, because I am a direct descendant of enslaved people, so I can trace my lineage to my great-great-grandmother, great-great-great-grandmother were born enslaved people. So she was born just after slavery was abolished. My mum's Jamaican, so on that side. My great-great-grandmother is Cuban, so South America is the connection. And so generational trauma, which is what we now know, I did not know this at the time, generational trauma passes down. It's not always in terms of having like an emotional breakdown in the way that we think about trauma. It's what it is that you carry elements, as we all are. So if you think about what we tell our children based on our experiences of the world, now imagine if your starting space from what you know is in being enslaved, and you're passing down this whole idea of get your head down, don't cause any trouble, be grateful for the opportunities that you're given because you don't get those opportunities. That carries its way through. Even I've got a 12-year-old, and even I can't, like, now I'm more cognizant, but up until, the first 12 years of her life, I was the one telling her, to make sure that if her friend starts shoplifting in a shop, she's out the shop. And it's not because, like you say, kids, it's bad and it's naughty. It's all of those things. But also I said, when the police come, they're coming for you first because you're Black.
That's awful, yeah.
So that's the talk that I have with my 12-year-old daughter. If I had a son, the talk I would be saying to him is, you do not leave the house with a hoodie on. You can have the hoodie, but don't ever put the hood up.
Yeah.
And if the police stop you, do not cause any issues, even if you've not done anything. So if you can imagine what that does to your psyche, where you're always living, even if you don't think about it, as Black people, we're always very conscious of the spaces that we go into and thinking about, if push comes to shove, we know we will lose. Do you know what I mean? So then,
it's like a subjective existence, isn't it?
Correct.
There's always a layer above,
living two lives as well, because you're kind
correct.
of you're acknowledging this stuff is happening and trying to deal with it, but not tackling it at the same time because you can't.
And then I got to, so back to your question, Jack, is what did I think? What was I also, let's be honest, what was I scared of? Right. So the day I recorded the video, and I part of me always thinks, oh Jesus, but if anyone would ever go back and have a look at, not my first video, so I look bright and breezy, like, I look nice, got some lipstick on, I'm like fabulous, tell everybody about my Black experience, talking for a minute, and then, so I was like, do you know what I mean? I was like, yes, and you know what? Yeah, I might talk about the other HR stuff when I'm ready. I was giving it all of that. You can hear it. I was giving it all of that in this day one video, as I call it. But interesting. So I recorded the video and all fine. But the day before, I didn't sleep. The night before, I was due to post it on LinkedIn. So, you know, like LinkedIn is like the coming out parade. Like, it's like the modern day coming out parade of everything, isn't it? You don't exist until it's posted on LinkedIn. And I couldn't sleep the night before, and I was crying, and I was like a hot mess. And my partner was like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, you know, and I said to him, oh God, I don't know if I should post this video, you know, and then the morning, I'm still like bawling, and I'm super private person, you know, and I'm going, oh, you know, and then, so I'm writing this caption, and in the caption, I actually wrote, like, I can't find it now because I've posted way too much stuff, but I actually said, like, I'm crying when I'm writing this, not because I stand by every single thing that I said, but I thought to myself, this is it. I've like thrown away my career by talking about this. Nobody is going to work. So before I pressed like post, I said to my partner, he works in a power plant, and I said to him, and I just started like my own HR company a few months before then. So I was still newbie. Like I was still one of these people, the pipeline of definite maybes ran eternal. You know what I mean? So I was still in that space. And I remember saying to him, you're it for a year. You know, so you've got to look after this family, because I said, I am not going to earn a penny, because nobody's going to want to work with me. Nobody's going to hire me to do anything. Nobody's going to want to partner with me to do anything, because I then become the black woman talking about this black stuff. And he said, like, I've got you. But also he said, if it's upsetting you this much, why are you doing it? And I said, I have to. And I did it. And clearly, you know, like, I'm not destitute or anything like that. But when you talk about the conditioning is so deep that physically my body was trying to protect me by trying to make it difficult for me to post the video. Do you know what I mean? And it's that deep. And even if you talk to a lot of black people now, and I know I've got, you know, in my magic phone of tricks with it, I have everything in here, all the good, the bad, and the, you know, all the rest of it. But one of the things that I do have is so many messages from black people who occupy very senior positions in the world of business, in the world of work, who told me to not only carry on talking, but they said, because you're saying what I cannot say. That is how deep this is.
So, and that's, to be honest, that's the bit that gets me. And when you were talking about the emotion you were going through before posting the video, and having to turn around to your partner and say, look, you're going to have to, you know, kind of carry this for the next 12 months, because, you know, you expect backlash, you know, you expect like, and then, you know, what's it going to mean for my business? Am I going to be able to get custom? Because there's this inherent association of like taboo and disassociation with a difficult conversation.
Right.
And like, it's still, you know, fascinating that is still prevalent. And you know, and whether people actually know that that's still the case, right? So
Yeah.
why do you think it's still such a, obviously we had the George Floyd incident, and, you know, obviously now, you know, with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the kind of political pushes that we have, why is it that people still feel like it's a bit of a taboo subject to associate with, almost like the difficult person that's having the difficult conversation? Why is that even a situation that still occurs?
I think there's a couple of things. I think historically it has been such a difficult conversation. Partly, if I'm honest, because what I always say to people is, you've got to remember, and this is like one of the beautiful things, because I've done so many videos and I talk about this so many times, like I do not even flinch when I talk about some of these really difficult stuff, because I'm used to it. And I see people go, you know, and I just say to them, just, I'll hold your hands metaphorically, virtually through the screen, and I'll take you through this. But one of the things that I say is that what you've got to understand is we are living in a white supremacist society. And what I mean by that is, I don't mean like, everyone thinks I mean like American X. Remember that film American X with the guy with the skinheads? You remember back in the day? Do you remember that one? And everyone thinks like, and I go, no, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, we live in an inherent society that has prioritized a system which benefits people who don't look like me. That's what, when people talk about white supremacy, they don't mean you as an individual, they mean the way society is constructed. And so what I mean by that is, you see it play out every single day. So leadership teams that are majority white, that is an output of a white supremacist society, particularly when you have other people who aren't white occupying frontline operational roles. And then as you go higher, it's less. Now, some people have said to me, yeah, but like that's not deliberate. But then when you start to understand our education system, and then when you start to understand our graduate education system, then when you start to understand how hiring decisions are made, then when you start to understand how bias and affinity bias, comes in. So if you're a senior person, you are more likely to sponsor and give a leg up to somebody who reminds themselves of you. But guess what? If you're a middle-aged white guy, there is going to be nothing about me and my lived experience that's going to remind you of, there's just going to be no connection. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that sort of racism, inherent sort of systemic elitism is everywhere. And one thing I've seen from your content, I think, was a really interesting conversation around, well, I can't put black people in these roles because they're not in the talent pool. There is no talent out there in these different groups of people. What would you say to that, for instance, or what have you said to that before?
Like the polite version. Well, I won't swear.
No, please do no. So obviously, I think it is a bullshit notion. Yeah,
it's a bullshit notion, but also it depends. Right. So if you're playing golf and you look around and you're going to turn around and say there's no black people that are golfers, because and that's kind of the thing. So we're so used to, and I think also the challenge is that we have our own version of the American dream in the UK, right? We call it meritocracy, right? So we are all fed this food that says if you work hard enough, get your degrees, you've got to get your education, you've got to get your head down, we're all fed that same thing, and therefore amazing things will happen. You'll get the job, you'll get the whatever. And then what we also start to realize is by buying into that, if you don't get to those positions, inherently there must be something wrong with you, or there's something wrong with those people. And that's what we've had. So I still get, even now, you would think with like the awakening of this movement, right, that started with a moment with George Floyd. And I still get people going, yeah, but like, I don't understand how companies can be held accountable for the fact that if you just thought that maybe black people aren't good enough, you know what I mean? Like, and that genuinely, or, I had an individual the other day say to me, yeah, but I don't think there's an issue because nobody's ever told me there's an issue. And I'm a bit like, X plus Y does not equal what you've just said. It's like there's no, do you know what I mean? There's no correlation. So, and that's the bit where I think people struggle with trying to think about the fact that, the three of us were all, I'm assuming you're both born in Britain, right? I'm British, right? So three of us are British. For the purpose of my example, don't be telling me you're born in Greece or something, because that's completely
Actually,
I'm Swedish.
Actually.
So, because it ruins what I've got to say. Just nod your head. We'll go British, yes, Shereen, we're British, yeah, for the purpose of the story. But what I always say is, look, the three of us, we're both British, we'll be of a certain age, right? But I said, from an organisational perspective, the two of you will have a straight run into an organisation. I have to hope that they've got an evolved diversity and inclusion approach that means I get in and also have a straight run. But I will never have a straight run because of the colour of my skin. So I really challenge this inherent idea within HR and within business. When people go, oh no, but we need to do more around our diversity and inclusion. And I'm like, well, you also need to challenge the fact why we need it in the first place. Because actually what you're saying is white is normal and anyone else and anything else comes under diversity. And it's more than that. It's white, cisgender, able-bodied individuals is normalcy. Do you know what I mean? Anyone else who doesn't fit that bracket has to wait to go into the diversity bracket. Do you know what I mean? That's like how deep I take it. So I challenge HR and business professionals a lot to say, you can't use this movement as an opportunity to dust off the same dry biscuit stuff we've been doing about D&I for all these years. Like, this is my favourite phrase, dry biscuit.
Dry biscuit.
Dry biscuit.
Crumbly.
Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? It's like drying it. None of us get excited, even when we hear, but you can't use this movement to use this same stuff without questioning, right?
Yeah, totally. I talk a lot in the benefits world about how like the word flex is dead because it just doesn't mean anything anymore. But I've already seen everyone piles into diversity and inclusion, and they claim to be anti-racist, but they're not showing why they are. Or the thing that irritated me the most when the BLM movement first came out was that actually everyone sort of said we're just pausing to educate ourselves, and I felt like, well, actually no, you're just checking whether you've got stuff going on that is going to get you into trouble before you say something. Sorry.
Word. That was me,
Yeah.
like agreeing. Word. Right. Right. But also, this educate, and this is the thing where I say, because some people are like, oh no, but I just feel like I'm not ready yet because I feel like I have to learn more. And I said, listen, right. That's what I say to people is, you got to learn how to build the plane and fly it at the same time, because we as Black people have been waiting 400 plus years to get to this point every time. And this is why I think I'm more of a, like, an affectionate, cynical person, because, I see the excitement when President Obama was made a president because it's like a Black man and he won. Then I see the excitement that Biden won over Trump, and we're getting into all of that. And my thing that sits underneath all of that is we've been here before. So I say to people, do you not think people celebrated Martin Luther King, the sanitized aspects of what he said, because he's been hijacked as like this whole, he had very challenging things to say, but people pick and chose some of his messages to fit the narrative to say that we live in a post-racial world, right? But I said, but when he was assassinated and there was this outpouring of love and respect for him, do you not think people assumed that his assassination was going to set us finally on the path to racial equality? And then here we are in 2020, and we're still seeing leadership teams, even HR. If I'm really honest, like, listen, some of my most challenging conversations have been with HR people who even stuttered to say the word Black, like literally. And I'm going, so you can imagine me, right? And I'm trying to be really gentle, and I'm going, well, we're living in a white supremacist world, and this is what it means. And then, I was like, so I said, how many, literally in your statement, how many times does the word Black appear? This is like one of my, it's like a really rubbish test, but it proves the point. And I say to people, when you're doing your revamped ED&I strategy, so everyone's been given a lot more budget to tackle this. And I said, if I do Control and F, how many times am I going to see the word Black? Not BAME, not ethnic minority, Black. And if the answer is 0, you've got to go back and do some work, because what people don't realise is if you don't take the time to understand this and do at the same time, back to your point, Jack, about acting, doing something, is you're exploiting a movement, again, that is created to finally make some equitable practices in place for Black people. But because of your discomfort, you're using the same movement to get more budget, to get more headcount, to still tackle the things up here. So you'll still go gender, you'll still go this, you'll go ethnic minorities, you'll just keep saying the same thing, but louder. Yeah, and actually what you're doing is a disservice to Black people. And what a lot of people don't understand is diversity and, inclusion was hijacked as later on, but this whole idea of raising awareness came off the back of the civil rights movement. So the irony that it started with Black people, not from a positive place, but from a way that a lot of the American companies could avoid getting taken to court for breaking the laws about how they treated Black people. So they went, rather than get the fine, can we just do some training for our managers and help them understand differences? That's where it started from. And then we get to 2020 and it's been hijacked, and the very people it was put in place to support are still left behind. Do you know what I mean? And so this is the sort of conversation that I have, and people are like, oh my God, I didn't know that. But that's what I mean about doing the work.
Yeah, totally. You also end up with 2 groups, don't you? Because you end up with ethnic minorities and white people or normal groups. And you're not serving a purpose. You're just ticking a box and saying, we're totally anti-racist, by the way, because we've got this bit of paper that says
absolutely.
We have a phone call once a month and we invite anyone who's not white on it.
And you must sit in your guilt. And you must, and we're gonna, and that's the thing that I don't. And I think probably one of the things that has surprised a lot of Black people, if I'm honest, because they're like, you're so, like, I'm laser focused. I make no bones about the fact that I'm here to advocate for racial injustice. Like, that is my priority. And I don't shy away from any of those difficult conversations, but I've done it in a way that's brought everybody to listen to me. So it's not like I'm only popping with Black people. You know, I've got people from different faiths listening to me. I've got people in different countries listening to me. I've got, you know, if we're going to be really binary, I have as many Black people supporting my message and what I'm trying to do as I do white people from all over the world. So you can still focus on a group of individuals without, what's the word, feeling you've got to apologize for that.
Saying Black or whatever.
Right. Do you know what I mean? Like, I had to learn that lesson. So I was one of those before that. I'll be like, oh no, couldn't be seen to prioritize my own sodding people. So I was the one marching in inverted commas for every other marginalized group, for women, for disabled people, for members of the LGBTQ, but not the Black piece. Never the Black piece, because as a Black person, I can't be seen to do that, because then I bring into sharp focus the fact I am Black, even though I am Black, but I kind of don't want people to see me as a Black person first. So that's how complicated it is.
Do you know what? On that point, I'd be interested to ask you quite an honest question. So, having a look at HR teams now, and I've kind of had a number of conversations, kind of, you know, outside of recordings around, you know, some saying, look, I'm trying to implement this D&I policy, or I'm trying to implement, like, one of them was a Black mentorship program, specifically for people of Black origin within the organisation. But you know, the mindset was, but I'm white, so am I even really the right person to be doing this? Because I don't know, what it feels like to live and breathe that. I don't know, what it feels like to kind of have those, prejudices and kind of live with it. And one school of thought is, okay, that's a rational argument. The other school of thought is, I don't know, this is probably a quite a basic example, but like if there's a white middle-aged wealthy man looking at someone that's robbing a bank, but the person robbing a bank isn't white, isn't healthy, isn't wealthy, isn't a middle-aged man, we can still tell what's right and wrong, and you don't need the race doesn't kind of play a part in that. So what advice would you give if someone's kind of sat there thinking, oh, man, I've got to think about how I get this right, and and really want to kind of execute it in the right way, but I don't feel as though I'm in a right position to be the one leading this within the organization. What kind of advice would you give to someone that's kind of going through that at the moment?
It's a very common thing, and I think there's probably two things at play, or three. I'm actually going to talk about three things at play. Firstly is, if you don't have, it's not just about the lived experience. So everyone thinks like inherently because we're Black, we can professionally solve this problem. I am an exception, I'm not the rule, right? So I do this for a living. It's what I believe in, but I also do it for a living. It's a choice. So nobody's lumped it on me as an additional bit of responsibility along with my day job, which happens a lot within organizations. So a lot of them have gone straight to the Black people. Oh shit, you're Black. What's going on? Like, what we got to do? Can you, like, literally, I've got stories, again, in my magic bag of tricks. I've got all in here.
All the trade secrets are all in there.
I always say to people, receipts, right? It's all in here, right? And, but, so you've got everything from just help me understand, and I want to, right from, can you draft our PR statement? Do you know how many Black people drafted the Black Lives Matter statements for a lot of these organizations? It would kill you if you knew. They were expected, so they are not only as individuals, because as the Black community at that time, like, we were feeling pretty shit, if I'm honest, not just because of what happened, but almost it's the backlash to even having the conversation about it is what made a lot of us feel like, wow, is this really our place in society? So in a literal sense, and I am very literal, so people go, oh my God, Shereen, must you say that? But I go, listen, tell me what is different than being on the plantation field other than it looks different. Do you know what I mean? If we're still in this, I know, I always take it there. If we're still in this space, I know, so it's just the way I am. My partner's like, must you? And I'm like, listen, it's a visual, right? But I always say, if we're still in this space in 2020, when we can't even say that our existence is problematic because of these structural issues, we have not moved from the plantation field. There's no difference. And so when you see that in an organizational sense, what happens is the leadership team or the HR person or whoever says, oh my God, like what's the name of that black person in finance? What's their name? Can you go? Oh, go and get them, right? And then they get them to draft a statement. They get them to come up with ideas about what the whole organization should do to show commitment to anti-racism, racial injustice, whatever you want to call it. And this poor black person is thinking, one, I can't even cope with the world right now because of all these things. And don't forget, as black people, we're dying at a disproportionate rate from COVID-19 as well. So we got all of that stuff going on, thinking, geez, if we leave our house, that's it. You know, so psychologically, there's a lot going on in that space. But that person invariably is not in a leadership position role, so they have no influence. So they're thinking, I'm not equipped to do this, but if I say no, I'm potentially going to lose my job. But I can't say no. But then if I say yes, I've got more work to do. So what people don't realize is there's like an additional burden on the burden on the burden already. So that's a problem. If you're a black HR person, the company will expect you to be. They think that they have McKinsey level consultancy knowledge within this one black person because you're black. Yeah. They're coming to you. You know what I'm saying? They're coming to you like, yeah. You know what I mean? They're coming to you like, you know, you're gonna not only write the playbook, right? You're gonna go out into your communities and you're gonna bring your people to the organ. You know, they are literally taking that. So then again, the same thing, double bind. If you're black and you're thinking, gosh, no matter what, I will have my personal opinions, but no matter what I say, I'm gonna be speaking on behalf of the whole company. So that's on me. So whatever I say is the right or wrong thing to do. I'm not even sure it's the right or wrong thing to do because this is my role. I'm the finance analyst, right? I am not the chief diversity inclusion person. I'm not this, I'm not that. I'm the finance analyst. And they're asking me my opinions. And I can give them my opinions, but it's just my opinions. But they're going to build a whole strategy based on what I say. That's another level of pressure. Then if you're the non-black person, you don't have the lived experience. You've probably watched Central Park 5 and 13th and thought, shit. And then, okay, I kind of get it. But then you're not going to know how to apply it within the workspace. Then you've got your CEO or whoever going, when's the strategy coming? When's the this coming? Because we've got to. And so I feel for everybody internal in this space, not to like shamelessly plug myself, but one of the reasons why I do what I do from this point is I'm all about creating safe spaces for brave conversations. So my job is to relieve the burden of your internal teams, whoever they are, who do not understand this issue. I can't fix the whole lot, and that's not my job, but my job is to contextualize it for you. My job is to help your black people feel listened to, and then you take that information and decide what you want to do. The challenge that you were talking about, Matthew, that comes up is when some people are too scared to admit they don't know. So they try and fudge it. So they try and build a solution. They watch a couple of CIPD webinars and think they're ready. And then they go off and do. And again, it goes back to my point about you will do more damage if that's your way of thinking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So what I think about as well is, you know, in the workforce in particular, there's a lot of people that respond back about how movements aren't, or they're anti-white, for instance, you know, rather than being pro-black or something. And then I think about, you know, Stormzy created a grant, didn't he? A scholarship for
Cambridge.
In Cambridge. He paid for it, you know, and I think it's every year, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he got a lot of heat saying, you know, this is anti-white, and he responded to say, this is pro-black. I'm trying to do something for people who can't get here. And I'm trying to fund that using my own money. How do we turn the tables in a workforce to say, well, this isn't about being anti. The only anti-part is being anti-racist, but being proactively anti-racist instead of just saying it. But how do we be more pro-black, for instance, in the workplace?
Do you know what I think? What that example, and I've had this when I hired 2 black interns. Oh my goodness, the abuse I got on a professional platform called LinkedIn for hiring. And I think, do you know what it is? I think people don't understand the difference between equality and equity. Because if you think for years we've talked about equality, which for me right now in this context, equality is, if you're still talking about the equality, you are still on the All Lives Matter brigade. I don't want to be seen to be doing anything specific for this group here. We're all human beings. We're all important. Yes, yes, and yes. Absolutely. If you understand equity as a distinction to equality, what you're recognizing is for some people, for reasons that have nothing to do with their inherent characteristics, are predisposed to succeed or fail because of the structures and the systems linked to the colour of their skin. Meaning, and I always say to people, like, my version of equality, do you know what I mean, is not when black people are like here taking over the world, as everyone seems to think that's what we're trying to do. It's to say that we have equal opportunities to succeed or fail. Because let's be honest, some of us ain't shit, you know, that's fine. As human beings, we're not all shit, we're not all the shit. We can all, you know, it's human beings, right? But I say, but it has nothing to do with the colour of your skin. You know, let us all be rubbish. Do you know what I mean? Sitting around in our, you know, not doing a lot and not contributing to society. But let's not have that be that we're in that position because of the colour of our skin. That's all I'm saying. So within an organisational sense, I think if you've got a leadership team, you've got a HR team that still can't get their head around equity, you're jeopardising every single thing that you could do, because everything that is isolating and contextualising this issue for black people is about equity, because equity says some people, to get to the start line, need things removed. And I always caution against using more help, because that implies that like we can't do for ourselves. It's like, no, the system has been stacked against us to not get to that point. So certain barriers have got to be removed, or things need to be put in place so we can get over those barriers just to get us to the start line. This is what people don't understand. It's not to do the 100-meter sprint and start 5 minutes before everybody else. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, no, listen, we can't get into the changing rooms right about now. Never mind get to the sudden starting line. That is what we're, you know what I mean? That's what we're saying. So, you know, when I talk to CEOs and I get them to start thinking about this, and I said, you have to be comfortable with prioritizing black people, or if it makes you feel better, you have to be comfortable with practicing equity before you can do anything. If you are still not comfortable, you've got to take a minute and you've got to think about it again before you go. Because the worst thing you can do is go hell for leather flying the equality flag, because that's what we have done for 400 plus years. And that is why we're still here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's that great equality and equity image that's knocking about, and I've spoken about it before, of, you know, the fence or whatever, and
and they're standing on the blocks.
Yeah, give everyone the opportunity to get to the start line, rather than saying, you know, we're going to give you all the same playing field, because that's a completely different thing.
Because it implies, and I think the problem that people don't understand is it implies that all the systems that we are part of are equal, and they're not, because we inherited system structures, policies, whether from government, health, employment, all of those things, based on, and you know what also people forget, like we're all like turning our noses up at the US, but listen, if it wasn't for the UK, we would have had no slave trade in the world, because it's the sudden the British Empire, with our colonialization and imperialism, we started that, so we are reaping. So we're like sat here going, oh, it's everyone else is going, hello, wasn't it? You know what I mean? It's like, sorry, you know. So it's almost like you've got to recognize that there were systems put in place to make sure that we didn't get to participate equally. Do you know what I mean? And that's why you have to address that. That's where the structural element comes into it, and understanding it's the things that we're standing on. Not to say, you know, Jack and Matthew, you're racist because you're white and your grandparents are racist because you're white. No, none of us, we all have ignorance. But I think now it's like, if you're not questioning all these things that prop us up as human beings within society, then that is deliberate now, because we already know there's an issue. So that's what I say to people. Like, so if you're not doing anything, there are still organizations that still don't, they're hoping this is going to pass. But the problem is, when you get to this time next year and your leadership team still look the same, and the proportion of your employees, meaning where they are according to the hierarchy. So if you've only got black people in your frontline operations and you've got nobody in leadership, if you haven't done anything at all to address racial injustice, it will look deliberate. And people will infer that you're a racist organization because you don't want anything to change. It's that simple. And I think some people haven't got that memo yet, but they will. It will come.
Sure. And like, so, a lot of the terms that we've used on this recording are, are relatively new to me. I know that Jack, obviously in his role, comes across the, the equity and equality, debate, kind of quite often. And I'm kind of getting my head around it now in terms of the different optics, that we can use to kind of look at these situations. And one of the things that I thought was quite interesting, actually, that I saw in your profile, was, an explicit comment around, I don't do diversity, I don't do inclusion, and I was like, oh, okay, so all right, I get it. So like, what is the difference, to someone that's kind of looking to find a different optic on this thing? What is the difference between being anti-racist and having a diversity and inclusion policy? Because clearly, there is a difference, right?
There is a difference, yeah. And I was, yeah. Do you know how many people ask me about that? Because it's like the first line, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
Not diversity, not inclusion, not belonging.
That's it.
Like,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's it. Yeah. So everyone's like, oh, what's she saying that? Right. So let me just context that, because I have been that one, right? Stood up, do my keynote speech for the HR conferences. Oh yes, cultural fit, belonging, how important it all is. Underneath it all is a subtext that says that all of that stuff sits here, like up here. And if you're, what's the word? Fortunate is not the word I use, but if you're privileged, I guess, let's use that word if we must. If you're privileged enough, right, that you can fundamentally come into work and know that you will see people who look like you all over the shop. That's a privilege. If you know that your manager and your manager's manager and your senior director looks like you, that's a privilege. When you then start to understand all the things that we talked about, like bias and all that sort of stuff. If you're in a situation where you're Black, and I know because I've been here before, do you know how many times I've been the wild card from a recruitment point of view? So the agencies will have 10 candidates.
Not on purpose, you mean?
No, like literally because of the colour of my skin. They don't know me at this point, Jack, so they don't know I'm a wild card, literally. Do you know what I mean? But they
literally
they
wild.
they don't know that bit. They don't know that bit. But what they will say. So I have been used to say, well, we've gone slightly outside of brief here, and Shereen's really good. And so there was for years I never showed up on any executive search person's list, even though my experience to a T. And the irony is that I got hired by direct. I was directly sourced into roles. And like these such companies were a bit like, oh yeah, we knew of Shereen, but we didn't think to include her in. And one of them actually said, because I didn't think the business was ready for a Black person. Now, the reality is they were probably correct. But the point is they'd already made that decision. Do you see what I mean? So therefore, if you're a Black person, you don't have, and if you're a Black person and there are 10 roles going, of 10 people with exactly the same role, they will only hire one Black person. So you've actually only got 1 out of 10 chances to get the job. If you're a white person, you've got 9 out of 10, because they're going to try and hire, they'll either go Black or Asian. They'll pick one of the two or maybe another option. But, and so that's why from a D&I perspective, if we are not talking about the Black experience, which is what I talk about, if we are not talking about racial injustice, if we are not talking about systemic racism, if we are not having these sorts of conversations, which 9 times out of 10, in this country at least anyway, the US are evolving. That's why they've got DEI. We're behind. We're still talking about diversity and inclusion. At least the states are getting into the equity piece. But if you're still talking about belonging and recognising Diwali festival or bringing in rice and peas for Black History Month, because that's it. Do you know what I'm saying to you? Under the belonging banner. And I'm thinking to myself, but I've got people that can't get a job right about now. So that's why I say, no, I'm not interested in diversity, because that's an output. So it's the wrong way around anyway. Diversity is an output. That's what you get when you're building cultures that recognise and support and value individualism from that point of view. Inclusion is what you've got to work, like the anti-racist bit, like you were saying, Jack, you've got to do something to be inclusive. It just doesn't magically happen. So that's why all of these soft touch things and all of these people are the same people that will stutter over the word Black. I'm like, well, no. So if you want to talk to me, that's fine, but don't expect me to talk about
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Let's
You know
have.
what I mean? So that's
let-
why. That's why.
Let's
Love
have
it.
a curry on a Monday. Let's have a Chinese on a Tuesday. Let's have, whatever.
You know what I mean? Where's the pack? I like jerk chicken, like, you just think to yourself, like, listen, that I wish it was that simple. If it was that simple, I would have no problem. But it's not. And I even felt uncomfortable years ago. And you will see, there's an article that was done on me in a HR magazine talking about belonging and inclusion or something like that. And you can already see I was already cussing a little bit, not a hardcore, but it's always been there. I've always felt uncomfortable by the fact that we're not having these conversations. But even then, I alluded to it. If you read it now, I posted it a few months ago, actually, and people are like, oh my God, I was like, yeah, listen, alluded to it, I still didn't call it out. Whereas now I'm calling it out. Hello, not D&I, not belonging, no. But we can get to that when we've sorted. That's my thing. Like, that's why, you know what I mean?
When we've nailed it, we can have curries on a Tuesday.
Do you know what I mean? I'll bring the patties. Do you know what I mean? I'll bring the patties. Do you know what I mean? That was on me.
I'm starving. I haven't had lunch yet.
I know, me too. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, Chinese. Oh, God.
Do you know what I mean? And also, but I find myself saying to people, and also, before you even tell me that you are the least racist person, I do not care that you spend half of your wages in an Indian takeaway one night and a Chinese. That is not. Do you know what? You know how we've literally, and it's like, that is not a sign of cultural intelligence, my friends. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's what we've reduced it to.
You shouldn't have to say it though either. Like, why should you say it?
There is that.
You wouldn't start a conversation say, I don't hurt children, by the way. Like, why have you just said that? Like, what's that got to do with anything? Like,
nothing.
I've got two children myself. Like, I
haven't hurt them.
Me too.
I promise you, I don't hit them. Like, okay, great. I'm totally against
all children that come my way. I look you like, that's really weird. Now, what's going on there?
I'm totally against violence to children. Okay, thanks for saying. One thing I just want to ask very quickly as well is, like, if you got a tip, if someone's got someone's got a role open and they want to try and do something of action and change their recruitment process, for instance, to be pro-black, or to look for candidates, like you said, there's a whole room of people. It doesn't matter what they are, but you want to bring in someone and give someone that chance that they haven't got before. How do they go around doing that, like, practically?
If you want, like, my super honest answer, I would say that's the wrong place to start. Do you know what I mean? Like, because, and the reason why I say that is because that's what we've always done, thought to fix this problem. Because you can see now how many organisations lead with their quotas, right? So they're going to have X representation. That's like after the horse has bolted in terms of this, in terms of this issue. So what I say to them is, before you can convince anybody that they should come to your organisation, you've got to be showing that you've cleaned the house. That's the closest analogy. So you've got to show that the curtains are clean, the carpet is clean, the sofa is working, if something, so you've got to be able to show that within your culture, it's not about perfection. And I think this is also one of the things that I want to, if I can give people permission and reassurance, is there is no perfect playbook for this. It does not exist. Like, the closest we would have to learning from is the apartheid in South Africa. And even then, they still have their own challenges. But there is no playbook. So don't approach this thinking that if I get it wrong, that's like the end of me. And that's a cultural thing. So I can't speak for people's culture. But from this, what I say is, action and intent and figuring it out and making mistakes and still carrying on will infinitely mean we make more progress in this than waiting to be perfect. Recruitment is the easiest thing that people jump towards, but you can have representation, back to my point about politics and having Barack Obama as president, and nothing changed from a structural racism point of view. So all you're doing is you're putting more people in harm's way. If you haven't point blank said, we need to evolve our culture to be anti-racist. We need to evolve our culture to recognize that we need to practice equity now and talk less about equality, because we're not ready for equality yet, my friends. So let's hold on for that one. Let's focus on the equity piece and then do both, that build the plane and fly it at the same time. So still hire your people, because you might need them as well. If explicitly, we're going to reward you for it, we're not going to take the proverbial. but also actively work on your culture at the same time, I think is, and I know that's not like a direct answer, but that's what I would say.
It totally is, because it's not about sticking a plaster over the problem, or oh, now we've hired a black person, we're not anti-racist. People do knee jerk and think, well, there needs to be a change in the tides, don't there? Because if you're that black person coming in, for instance, you've bought into this philosophy that the company's saying to you, but you're looking around and actually they're not living and breathing it every day.
Oh my goodness. And you're the only person, and they're like, right now, so now that we've got said person, our job is done. Do you know what I mean? And they're like,
tick.
Right.
Well, I mean, we've already hit an hour. I've got like another 30 questions I didn't even get to.
Oh my goodness. You know what? People are going to be like, right, she must be coming with the whole, because that's the thing. My vibe is never like, and to be fair, I still get criticised for this moment, because people are like, oh, Shereen, if you want to, appeal to the business world, you have to be this, this, and this. And I'm like, nah, listen, no, I
need to be authentic. Yeah,
the business world needs to change.
It does need to. I 100% agree. It does need to change, and I'm all right waiting for it to change if that's what, from that point of view. Meaning, I'm not going to be who I was before, which got me nothing but crying about telling my truth. That's how deep it was. So why would I put myself back in that space? Do you know what I mean? But at least people know that I'm going to give them real talk. So I'm not going to lie to them. Do you know what I mean? So at least if I tell them they're doing a good job, they're like, oh my goodness, Shereen's given us the sun as a reward, not even the gold star. It's a sun coming from Shereen, because if she says we're on the right path, that's got to mean something right. Right, she ain't playing. So she says, you know what, we're asking the right questions. You know how many people say to me, oh God, Shereen, that sounds like, no, as you were. Listen, you're getting it. Keep going. That's my job. Start it off, and then they'll run with it themselves.
And if people do want to connect to you after kind of listening to this podcast, or kind of watching the podcast, like how can they kind of get in touch with you?
Oh, they can lots of ways. So clearly my home is LinkedIn, so I like give LinkedIn a headache every day with something. I do post nice videos though that do make people laugh. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can send me an email at Shereen@hr-rewired.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter occasionally at HR Rewired. Yeah, so you'll just type in my name. Honestly, I'm very Googleable. So just type in my name and you'll see my
Googleable.
Googleable. Yes, and you'll see my gap teeth, so you'll know it's me.
you see our bald heads and know it's us as well.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, look, Shereen, honestly, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to kind of join us on the show. Like, I find the conversation genuinely refreshing.
I wish everything that I did was like this, because you two are amazeballs. Because like some people speak dry biscuit, bit dry biscuit, but like this is great. So
Thank you so
and that's
much.
the thing. You can still laugh at. You can still. It's not all like depths in the. I don't know how we've managed to talk about racism and laugh at the same time.
I know.
But you can. It's serious stuff, and because that's life, isn't it? This is it is what
and
it is.
it's the conversation that I think that, as Jack says, the business world is missing at the moment. And like I would personally be really fascinated to kind of follow your journey as you're kind of getting into the UN ready, and I'd love to kind of revisit this in the near future, hopefully next time in person, who knows, but
yes,
I think 100%. So honestly, like, thank you so much for joining us on the show, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.